She took her newborn baby to the courtroom to be served a divorce paper by her husband, but he froze when he saw the baby. The heavy oak doors of courtroom 207 swung open. Every head turned as Dr. Olivia Reed stepped inside, cradling an 8-month-old baby against her chest. Her eyes locked with those of her estranged husband across the room. "Your Honor," she said quietly, "I apologize for my tardiness." Nathaniel Reed, a man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching, felt his blood turn to ice. The divorce papers in the manila folder before him suddenly weighed 1,000 pounds. The baby, his son, stared at him with eyes that mirrored his own, tiny fingers clutching his mother's blouse. "I didn't know the child would be present today," the judge commented, peering over her glasses. "Neither did I, Your Honor," Olivia replied, shifting the baby to her other arm. "But my childcare fell through, and I couldn't miss this hearing. Again." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. 5 postponed hearings, 8 months of absence, a lifetime of moments Nathaniel had chosen to miss. "Mr. Reed," the judge addressed him directly, "are you prepared to proceed with the dissolution of marriage today?" Nathaniel opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. His son, Julian, was studying him with an intensity that seemed impossible for an infant. And then, against all logic, against everything Nathaniel deserved, the baby smiled at him. One small, gummy smile that cracked open the carefully constructed walls around Nathaniel Reed's heart. "Mr. Reed?" the judge prompted. Nathaniel began, his voice suddenly unfamiliar to his own ears. "I would like to request a continuance, Your Honor. If you've ever wondered what truly matters in life, this story might just change your perspective. Like and subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips for more powerful stories that remind us what's truly important. If you're still with Dr. Phillips, say in the comment section, 'Yes, I am with you, Doctor.' Now, let's discover how Nathaniel Reed, a man who had everything and nothing all, at once found himself facing the consequences of his choices in that courtroom. Nathaniel Reed had built his empire brick by brick, deal by deal, sacrifice by sacrifice. The Reed Group headquarters dominated the downtown skyline, 68 stories of glass and steel that reflected the clouds by day and glowed like a beacon by night. His corner office on the top floor offered views that stretched to the horizon, a daily reminder of all he had conquered. At 38, Nathaniel had everything society told him to find success, wealth that ensured he would never worry about money. Again, respect that bordered on fear from his business rivals, and power that opened doors most people didn't even know existed. On this particular Tuesday morning, Nathaniel stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city wake up 40 stories below. His reflection stared back at him, tailored charcoal suit, precisely knotted tie, not a hair out of place. The perfect image of control. "Mr. Reed, your 8:30 is waiting." His executive assistant, Caroline, stood in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Thank you, Caroline. Any messages?" Nathaniel asked, not turning from the window. "Mr. Takahashi confirmed the Tokyo meeting for next week. The London investors want to move up their call to tomorrow, and—" Caroline hesitated, which was unusual for her. Dr. Winter's office called again about the insurance forms for Julian. Dr. Winters. He still couldn't get used to hearing Olivia referred to by her maiden name again. Even after 2 years of growing distance, he'd continued to think of her as Olivia Reed. "Forward those to legal," he said dismissively. "Anything else?" "That's all." Caroline's tone was perfectly professional, but Nathaniel caught the slight disapproval in her reflection. She'd been with him for 7 years, long enough to remember when he and Olivia had been happy, when they'd talked about having children someday, when he'd still made it home for dinner more often than not. Nathaniel turned from the window. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Make sure everyone has the quarterly projections." Caroline nodded and left, closing the door silently behind her. Alone again, Nathaniel reached for his phone, finger hovering over Olivia's contact. Her professional headshot smiled up at him. Brilliant neurosurgeon, top of her class at medical school. The woman whose mind had challenged him as much as her beauty had captivated him. The last message he'd sent her was 3 months ago. A terse legal will handle. It in response to her notification that the divorce papers had been filed. Before that, there had been dozens of unanswered texts from her. Updates about the pregnancy he'd acknowledged but never truly engaged with. Notifications about doctor's appointments he'd promised to attend but always found reasons to miss. A Stark in labor message that he'd seen during a keynote speech in Dubai and decided could wait until after the networking dinner. He put the phone down without calling. The board was waiting. Tokyo was waiting. London was waiting. The entire Reed Group empire required his constant attention to continue its meteoric rise. The divorce papers would be handled on Thursday, another item to check off his endless to-do list. Just like the empire he'd built, his marriage would be dismantled, efficiently, with minimal disruption to his carefully ordered life. Or so he thought. Olivia Winters stood in the hospital locker room, changing from her. Scrubs into the cream blouse and navy skirt she'd selected for court. After a 7-hour emergency surgery to remove a brain tumor from a 10-year-old patient, all she wanted was sleep. Instead, she was preparing to face the man who had once been the center of her world. "You're sure you don't want me to come with you?" Dr. Samantha Patel, her closest friend and colleague, leaned against the lockers. "I can reschedule my afternoon appointments." "I need to do this alone," Olivia replied, applying a touch of mascara to her exhausted eyes. "Besides, you've already done enough by watching Julian all night. That little chunk is the highlight of my day." Samantha smiled, though I think he missed his mama. He kept looking at the door every time he heard someone in the hallway. Olivia's heart squeezed at the thought of her son. Julian had adapted to her erratic surgeon's schedule better than any baby should. Have to, but she still felt the weight of every minute she spent away from him. "How did he do with the bottle?" she asked, tucking her hospital ID into her purse. "Drank it like a champ. I swear he's grown since last week." "He has," Olivia confirmed. "None of his 3-month clothes fit anymore." A notification chimed on Olivia's phone. Her babysitter canceling last minute, a family emergency that couldn't be helped. Olivia closed her eyes, feeling the familiar pressure of being pulled in too many directions at once. "Sam, I hate to ask, but—" "I can't," Samantha interrupted apologetically. "I have that spinal reconstruction at 1, and we're already prepping the patient." Olivia nodded, mentally cycling through options. Her parents lived 3 states away. Her sister was on vacation. The hospital daycare was full, and the courthouse was 20 minutes across town. "I'll figure something out," she said, more to herself than to Samantha. She always did. 30 minutes later, Olivia sat in her car outside the daycare center connected to the hospital, staring at the no vacancy sign with Julian asleep in his car seat behind her. The familiar weight of doing everything alone settled onto her shoulders. "Looks like you're coming with me, little man," she whispered, catching Julian's sleeping reflection in the rearview mirror. His dark curls framed a face that looked so much like Nathaniel's it sometimes hurt to look at him. Same strong jaw already forming. Same intense expression, even in sleep. Same amber eyes that seemed to look straight through you when open. As she drove toward the courthouse, Olivia wondered what Nathaniel would do when he saw their son for the first time. Would he feel something, anything, that might crack the wall of indifference he'd built between himself and his family? Or would Julian be just another inconvenience to manage, another detail to delegate to his legal team? The courthouse loomed ahead, a massive stone building that had witnessed thousands of beginnings and endings. Today it would witness theirs. "We're going to be okay," Olivia promised Julian as she unbuckled him from his car seat. "No matter what happens in there." Julian blinked awake, looking up at his mother with complete trust. He reached one tiny hand up to touch her face, a gesture that never failed to melt her heart. "That's right," she whispered, kissing his palm. "It's always been you and me against the world. Today is no different." But as she climbed the courthouse steps, baby carrier in one hand and briefcase in the other, Olivia couldn't help wondering if today might change everything. Judge Eleanor Landry had presided over family court for 23 years. In that time, she'd seen marriages dissolve for every reason imaginable. Infidelity, financial disputes, incompatible life goals, simple changes of heart. She prided herself on maintaining professional detachment while still acknowledging the human cost of each case that crossed her bench. The Reed dissolution should have been straightforward. High asset divorce, no disputed property. Preliminary custody agreement already drafted. The kind of case that typically moved through her courtroom with efficient precision. But when Olivia Reed walked in with an infant that Judge Landry hadn't even known existed, the routine proceedings took an unexpected turn. "Mrs. Reed," Judge Landry said, removing her reading glasses, "I wasn't aware a minor child would be present today." "Neither was I, Your Honor," Olivia replied with the composed dignity that had earned her reputation as one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the state. "But childcare fell through, and I couldn't miss this hearing again." Judge Landry caught the slight emphasis on again and glanced at her case notes. Indeed, this hearing had been rescheduled 4 times, primarily at the request of Mr. Reed's counsel. She turned her attention to Nathaniel Reed, noting how the confident posture he'd displayed when entering the courtroom had vanished. He sat rigid in his chair, eyes fixed on the child in his wife's arms. "Mr. Reed," Judge Landry addressed him directly, "are you prepared to proceed with the dissolution of marriage today?" The hesitation was brief but noticeable. I would like to request a continuance, Your Honor." His attorney, an impeccably dressed woman with a reputation for ruthless efficiency, looked as surprised as everyone else in the courtroom. "On what grounds, Mr. Reed?" Judge Landry asked, maintaining her professional tone despite her curiosity. "I believe there are matters that need to be discussed between myself and Dr. Winters before we proceed," Nathaniel replied, his eyes still fixed on the child. "Your Honor," Olivia interjected, shifting the baby to her other arm. "We've had 8 months to discuss matters. Mr. Reed has chosen not to engage until now." Judge Landry considered the situation. In her experience, last-minute continuance requests often came from parties trying to delay the inevitable or gain tactical advantage. But something about Reed's expressions suggested different motivations. Given the presence of a minor child and the apparent need for additional discussion between the parties, "I'm going to grant a 15-minute recess," Judge Landry decided. "I suggest you use this time productively." As the judge left the bench, the courtroom fell into an uncomfortable silence. Nathaniel's attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but he seemed not to hear her. His attention remained fixed on the child, his son, who had begun to fuss slightly in Olivia's arms. "We need to talk," Nathaniel said finally, his voice rougher than Olivia remembered. 8 months too late," she replied quietly, but she followed him to the conference room adjacent to the courtroom, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. The conference room was small and utilitarian, a rectangular table, 6 chairs, outdated landscape prints on beige walls. Nathaniel closed the door behind them, creating a bubble of privacy amid the bustling courthouse. Julian had settled against Olivia's shoulder, one tiny fist gripping her blouse as he observed the unfamiliar surroundings with curious eyes. When his gaze landed on Nathaniel, he stared with the intense focus of recognition without memory, something familiar about this stranger that he couldn't possibly understand. "His name is Julian," Olivia said, breaking the silence. "Julian Alexander Reed. Though I'm not sure he deserves your last name." Nathaniel flinched at the deserved jab. "He has my eyes," he observed quietly. "Yes. And your stubborn determination, and your terrible sleep schedule," Olivia replied, her voice softening despite herself when she looked at their son. 8 months old, and already thinks 3 hours of sleep is plenty. 8 months, Nathaniel repeated, the number hanging between them like an accusation. "He was born on January 17th, Olivia finished for him. "At 4:36 in the morning, after 28 hours of labor, while you were in Dubai." The specific details hit Nathaniel with physical force. He'd known about the birth, of course. His assistant had informed him, had sent the appropriate flower arrangement to the hospital, had ensured the medical bills were paid. But hearing the exact hour, imagining Olivia enduring more than a day of labor while he attended networking events halfway around the world, it made the abstract concept of his absence brutally concrete. "I didn't know it would be that long," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. "You didn't ask," Olivia pointed out. "Just like you didn't ask about the complications, or the week we spent in the NICU, or his first smile, or the night he had a fever of 103, and I took him to the emergency room alone." Each missed moment landed like a blow. Nathaniel had spent 8 months compartmentalizing the reality of his child's existence, treating it like another business matter to be managed from a distance. Now, faced with the living, breathing result of that compartmentalization, the carefully constructed walls between his personal and professional lives began to crumble. "Why did you bring him today?" Nathaniel asked, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "I told you childcare fell through," Olivia replied, adjusting Julian as he squirmed. "Not all of us have the luxury of delegating our responsibilities." The barb struck its target. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, the familiar defensive anger rising automatically before he forced it back down. He deserved this. All of it. "He's beautiful," Nathaniel said finally, the simple truth breaking through his usually calculated responses. Olivia's expression softened fractionally. "He is. He's also exhausting, demanding, and completely worth every sleepless night." Julian chose that moment to reach toward Nathaniel, tiny fingers grasping at the air between them. The gesture, so innocent and trusting, sent a wave of emotion through Nathaniel that he hadn't experienced in years. "Can I?" he began, then stopped, unsure of his right to ask. Olivia hesitated, her protective instincts warring with the knowledge that, despite everything, this man was Julian's father. After a moment, she carefully transferred their son into Nathaniel's unprepared arms. "Support his head," she instructed automatically, though Julian was well past the newborn stage of needing such careful handling. Nathaniel adjusted awkwardly, his confident hands that signed billion-dollar contracts without hesitation, suddenly clumsy with the precious weight of his child. Julian studied him solemnly, reaching up to pat Nathaniel's clean-shaven cheek with curious fingers. "Hello, Julian," Nathaniel said softly, his voice catching. I'm your father." The simple introduction, so belated and inadequate, cracked something open inside him. This child, this perfect combination of himself and Olivia, had been growing, developing, becoming a person while Nathaniel had been chasing the next deal, the next acquisition, the next rung on a ladder that suddenly seemed to lead nowhere important. "I've missed everything," he whispered, the realization hitting him with devastating clarity. "Yes," Olivia agreed, no triumph in her voice, only sadness. "You have—" Julian began to fuss, tiny face scrunching with the beginning of a cry. Nathaniel looked panicked, his usual confidence evaporating. "He's probably hungry," Olivia explained, taking Julian back with practiced ease. She reached into the diaper bag and produced a bottle, which Julian accepted eagerly. "We don't have much time left. What did you want to discuss?" The question brought Nathaniel back to the reality of why they were here. The divorce proceedings waiting just beyond the conference room door. Looking at Olivia feeding their son with such natural grace, he struggled to reconcile the life he'd built without them, against the sudden, overwhelming desire to be part of the family he'd abandoned. "I want to request a continuance," he said finally. "Not just 15 minutes. I want to postpone the proceedings." Olivia's expression remained guarded. "Why?" It was a simple question that required a complex answer, an answer Nathaniel wasn't sure he fully understood himself. "Because I need time," he replied honestly. "Time to figure out how to be a father to Julian. Time to see if there's anything left between us worth saving." 8 months, Nathaniel," Olivia reminded him gently. "You've had 8 months." "I know, and I've wasted every day of it," he acknowledged. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just asking for a chance to try to make things right." Olivia studied him carefully, looking for any sign that this was another manipulation, another strategic business move. Instead, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: vulnerability. Real, unguarded vulnerability in the eyes of a man who had built his entire identity around never showing weakness. 30 days, she said finally. "I'll agree to a 30-day continuance. But Nathaniel, this isn't a game. If you're going to be in Julian's life, you need to actually be in his life. Not when it's convenient. Not when your schedule allows." "I understand," Nathaniel nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you." As they prepared to return to the courtroom, Julian finished his bottle and released a tiny, satisfied burp. The ordinary sound, so mundane in any other context, struck Nathaniel as miraculous. His son's first sound in his presence. A small moment he would have missed entirely if not for a canceled babysitter and a courtroom confrontation. "Time's up," Olivia said, gathering Julian's things. "Judge Landry is waiting." But as they walked back toward courtroom 207, Nathaniel knew the timeline that truly mattered had just begun. 30 days to prove he could be the father and husband his family deserved. If you're enjoying this story of redemption and second chances, take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support means everything to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips. Now, let's continue with Nathaniel's journey to reclaim what truly matters. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of awkward visits and tentative text messages. Nathaniel, a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, found himself humbled by the simple challenges of holding a squirming 8-month-old or correctly securing the straps of a high chair. "You have to make sure it clicks," Olivia explained patiently, demonstrating the proper technique for fastening Julian's car seat. "Pull the straps until they're snug but not too tight." They were standing in the parking lot outside her modest townhouse, a far cry from the luxurious penthouse they'd once shared. The Sunday morning sunlight caught the gold flecks in her brown eyes, reminding Nathaniel of the day he'd first met her at a hospital fundraiser 5 years ago. Dr. Olivia Winters, the brilliant neurosurgeon who had challenged his assumptions about everything, including himself. "Like this?" he asked, adjusting the straps with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Olivia checked his work. Perfect. You're learning. The faint praise shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but Nathaniel found himself absurdly pleased. 2 weeks ago, he couldn't have imagined that successfully buckling a car seat would feel more significant than closing a multi-million-dollar deal. I thought we could go to the park, he suggested. If that's okay with you. Olivia considered the request. These supervised visits had been her condition for the continuance. Nathaniel could see Julian, but only with her present. Not out of concern for Julian's safety, but because she didn't trust Nathaniel. Not to delegate Father Ho-Od to an assistant, the moment it became inconvenient. The park would be good, she agreed. Julian loves the swings. As they drove in separate cars to the nearby park, Nathaniel found himself checking his rearview mirror constantly, watching Julian babble happily in his car seat. The sight still felt surreal, this tiny person with his eyes and Olivia's smile, existing in a world Nathaniel had almost permanently excluded himself from. At the park, other parents pushed strollers and chased toddlers across the playground. Nathaniel felt conspicuously out of place in his casual designer clothes among the worn jeans and t-shirts of weekend parents. A few people recognized Olivia from the hospital, greeting her warmly and casting curious glances at Nathaniel. "Dr. Winters, how's our little man today?" An older woman approached, smiling broadly at Julian. "He's wonderful, Mrs. Gonzalez," Olivia replied, returning the smile. "How's Miguel doing after the surgery?" "Back to playing soccer already. That boy never stops. We can't thank you enough." Nathaniel watched the exchange with newfound admiration. He'd always known Olivia was respected in her field, but seeing the genuine affection her patients' families had for her made him realize how little attention he'd paid to her professional accomplishments these past years. "You saved her grandson's life," Nathaniel observed after Mrs. Gonzalez had moved on. "Brain tumor?" "Traumatic brain injury from a car accident," Olivia corrected, lifting Julian from his stroller. "He was in a coma for 3 weeks. Everyone had given up hope except his grandmother. And you," Nathaniel added. Olivia shrugged modestly. "I just did my job." "Your job is saving lives," Nathaniel pointed out. "Mine is making money." Lately, the comparison hasn't been flattering. The admission hung between them as they approached the baby swings. Olivia carefully settled Julian into the bucket seat, making sure his legs went through the proper openings. "Do you want to push him?" she offered. Nathaniel nodded, moving behind the swing. He gave a gentle push, and Julian's face lit up with delight at the motion. The baby's laughter, spontaneous and joyful, triggered something primal in Nathaniel's chest. A fierce, protective love he hadn't known he was capable of feeling. "He likes it when you make whooshing sounds as he swings forward," Olivia suggested. Nathaniel felt self-conscious but tried it anyway. "Whoosh," he said as he pushed the swing, feeling ridiculous until Julian's giggles doubled in response. Suddenly, looking foolish seemed a small price to pay for that perfect sound. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said as he continued pushing the swing, "about what happens after the 30 days. Olivia tensed visibly. "And I want to be part of Julian's life, really part of it, not just weekend visits and holiday photographs." "That would require significant changes, Nathaniel," Olivia pointed out. "Your work schedule alone." "I've already started restructuring," he interrupted. "I've promoted Carson to COO. He'll handle day-to-day operations and international travel." Olivia looked genuinely surprised. "Carson Phillips? Your protege? He's been ready for years." "I just couldn't let go of control," Nathaniel admitted. "But some things are more important than control." The simple statement, so at odds with the Nathaniel Reed who had built an empire on micromanagement, hung between them as Julian continued to swing, oblivious to the significant conversation happening around him. "What about us?" Olivia asked finally, the question she'd been avoiding for 2 weeks. Nathaniel stopped the swing gently, moving to face her. "That depends on you. I know I don't deserve another chance, Olivia. I know I broke something precious between us. But if there's any possibility that you could someday trust me again..." Julian chose that moment to let out an impatient wail, tired of being stationary. The serious conversation paused as both parents attended to their son's more immediate needs. "Someone's ready for lunch," Olivia observed, lifting Julian from the swing. "And probably a nap soon after." "I packed sandwiches," Nathaniel offered, gesturing to the expensive cooler bag he'd brought. "Turkey for us, and those organic baby food pouches you mentioned Julian likes." Another small surprise. Nathaniel Reed, who had personal chefs at his disposal, had made sandwiches. The gesture shouldn't have meant anything, but Olivia found herself touched by the effort. They settled at a picnic table Julian secured in a portable high chair. Nathaniel had insisted on purchasing despite Olivia's protests that they already had one. She watched as Nathaniel carefully opened the baby food pouch, his confident hands now devoted to the simple task of feeding his son. "You still haven't answered my question," Nathaniel reminded her gently. "About us." Olivia sighed, absently straightening Julian's bib. "It's not that simple, Nathaniel. We can't just pretend the last 2 years didn't happen." "I'm not asking you to pretend," he replied. "I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove that I've changed, that I can be the man you fell in love with again." "And if you can't?" Olivia challenged. "If the next big deal comes along and suddenly Julian and I are back to being items on your to-do list?" The question struck at Nathaniel's deepest fear, that despite his best intentions he would revert to old patterns, that the drive that had made him successful would ultimately cost him everything that truly mattered. "Then you'll have every right to walk away," he said quietly, "and I'll respect whatever custody arrangement you think is best for Julian." Julian babbled happily, reaching for Nathaniel's sandwich with curious fingers. The simple gesture, his son wanting what he had, filled Nathaniel with a strange mixture of joy and melancholy. How many other moments like this had he missed? How many more might he miss if he couldn't prove himself? 1 month isn't much time, Olivia observed, gently redirecting Julian's hand back to his own food. "No," Nathaniel agreed. "But it's a start." And as they sat in the dappled sunlight of the park, sharing a meal that was unremarkable in every way except for the fact that they were sharing it together, Nathaniel realized that all the success he'd achieved paled in comparison to this simple moment with his family. Later that evening, after Julian had been bathed and put to bed, Nathaniel found himself lingering in the nursery doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of his son's chest. The room was painted a soft green, with constellations meticulously detailed on the ceiling. Olivia's handiwork, he guessed, remembering her interest in astronomy. "I used to do that too," Olivia said softly, appearing beside him. "Just watch him breathe, especially in the early days when he was in the NICU. I was so afraid to look away." "Tell me about it," Nathaniel requested, his voice hushed to avoid waking Julian. "About the NICU. About everything I missed." Olivia hesitated, then gestured for him to follow her to the living room. They settled on opposite ends of the sofa, a physical distance that reflected the emotional space between them. "The delivery was difficult," she began, her clinical tone betraying her discomfort with the memories. "My blood pressure spiked dangerously during labor. They were concerned about eclampsia." "That can be fatal," Nathaniel said, medical knowledge from board meetings with pharmaceutical companies surfacing in his mind. "Yes." "There were moments when they were more concerned about my survival than Julian's," Olivia admitted. "I was scared, Nathaniel, more scared than I've ever been in my life." The thought of Olivia, brilliant, capable Olivia, lying in a hospital bed fighting for her life while he attended cocktail receptions in Dubai, made Nathaniel physically ill. "When Julian was finally born, he wasn't breathing properly," she continued. "They took him to the NICU immediately. I didn't get to hold him for almost 3 days. "I should have been there," Nathaniel whispered, the inadequacy of the statement painfully apparent. "Yes, you should have," Olivia agreed simply. "But my point isn't to make you feel guilty, Nathaniel. It's to help you understand what you're asking for when you talk about being part of our lives again. Parenthood isn't something you can optimize for efficiency or delegate when inconvenient. It's messy and demanding and often terrifying." "I want the mess," Nathaniel said with surprising intensity. "I want the sleepless nights and the terrifying moments and all of it, Olivia. Because the alternative is going back to an empty penthouse and pretending that quarterly projections matter more than watching our son grow up." The baby monitor on the coffee table lit up with Julian's soft whimpers. Before Olivia could move, Nathaniel was already standing. "I've got him," he said, moving toward the nursery with purpose. Olivia watched him go, a mixture of hope and wariness battling within her. The Nathaniel Reed who had just volunteered for a middle-of-the-night soothing session was unrecognizable from the man who had missed his own son's birth for a business conference. In the nursery, Nathaniel found Julian standing in his crib, tiny hands gripping the rails as tears streaked his chubby cheeks. The sight of his son's distress triggered an instinctive response, a need to protect, to comfort, to make everything right. "Hey, buddy," Nathaniel said softly, lifting Julian into his arms. "It's okay. Daddy's here." The word daddy felt foreign on his tongue, a title he hadn't earned but desperately wanted to deserve. Julian's cries subsided as Nathaniel held him, tiny head resting against his shoulder. "I missed a lot," Nathaniel whispered, swaying gently in the darkened nursery. "But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." From the doorway, Olivia watched silently as the man who had once prioritized everything above his family now held their son with such tender care. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a beginning. As days turned to weeks, Nathaniel found himself learning an entirely new language, the language of fatherhood. He discovered that Julian's different cries meant different things: hunger, fatigue, discomfort, or simply the desire for attention. He learned that singing "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star" could soothe even the most determined. Tantrum, but only if accompanied by a gentle bounce and pat on the back. He memorized the precise temperature for bath water and the exact sequence for securing diaper tabs. The Reed group continued to function without his constant presence. The world didn't end when he silenced his phone during Julian's nap time. The markets didn't collapse when he attended a pediatrician appointment instead of an investor call. The business empire he'd built proved more resilient than his ego had allowed him to believe. 3 weeks into their arrangement, Nathaniel sat on Olivia's living room floor, attempting to help Julian stack colorful plastic blocks. The baby's coordination was still developing, his enthusiastic swipes often sending carefully balanced towers crashing to the carpet. "You have to be patient," Olivia advised, watching from the couch where she was reviewing patient files. "He's still figuring out how his hands work. Maybe he's not meant to be an architect," Nathaniel joked, rebuilding the tower only to have Julian demolish it again with gleeful determination. "Maybe he'll be a demolition expert," Olivia suggested, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. These moments of easy conversation had become more frequent over the past weeks. Not quite the comfortable intimacy they'd once shared, but no longer the tense formality of those first few visits either. A tentative truce built around their shared love for Julian. "I have those videos I mentioned," Olivia said suddenly, setting aside her work. "If you still want to see them." Nathaniel looked up, surprised by the offer. "I'd like that very much." Olivia retrieved her tablet, settling on the floor beside them, close enough that Nathaniel could see the screen, but not so close that they were touching. Julian immediately abandoned the blocks to crawl into his mother's lap, drawn by the familiar glow of the device that often displayed his favorite animated shows. "This is from the day we came home from the hospital," Olivia explained, pressing play on the first video. The footage showed a much smaller Julian, red-faced and swaddled tightly in a blue blanket. Olivia's sister could be heard narrating as they entered the townhouse for the first time as a family of 2. "Welcome home, Julian Alexander," the voice chirped off camera. "Your mommy is already a pro at this baby stuff." The Olivia in the video looked exhausted but radiant, gazing down at her newborn son with such naked love that Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. This moment should have been theirs to share, his voice behind the camera, his hands helping Olivia settle their son in his new home. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "I look exhausted," Olivia corrected, but there was no edge to her voice. The videos continued. Julian's first bath, his first smile, the first time he rolled over. With each milestone Nathaniel had missed, the weight of his absence grew heavier. Yet instead of retreating into guilt, he found himself absorbing every detail, asking questions, learning the history of his son's brief life through these digital memories. "This one's from last month," Olivia said, queuing up a final video. His first time in the baby swing. The screen showed Julian laughing uncontrollably as Olivia pushed him, gently in the same park swing they'd visited together weeks ago. His joy was so pure, so uninhibited, that Nathaniel couldn't help but smile. "Thank you," he said when the video ended, "for sharing these with me." "He should know you," Olivia replied simply, "and you should know him." Julian had grown bored with the videos and was now attempting to crawl toward the kitchen, his target apparently the shiny refrigerator door. Nathaniel scooped him up mid-journey, earning a squeal of surprise that quickly turned to giggles when he lifted the baby over his head. "I've been thinking," Nathaniel said, bringing Julian back down to rest against his chest, "about what happens after next week." The 30-day continuance was nearly over. Soon they would need to decide whether to proceed with the divorce or try another path. "So have I," Olivia admitted, her expression guarded. "I don't want to lose this," Nathaniel said, his voice low and earnest. "I don't want to go back to being a weekend father who sees Julian between business trips." I don't want to sign papers that make official what's been true for too long. That I chose my work over my family. Julian began to fuss, sensing the tension in his father's voice. Nathaniel automatically adjusted his hold, rubbing soothing circles on the baby's back until he settled again. What are you saying, Nathaniel? Olivia asked. I'm saying I want to try again, not just for Julian's sake, but for ours. He met her eyes directly. I still love you, Olivia. I never stopped. I just forgot how to show it. The admission hung between them, too significant to be casually acknowledged, too important to be ignored. Olivia's expression remained carefully neutral, but Nathaniel caught the slight tremble in her hands as she closed the video app on her tablet. Love isn't the issue, she said finally. It never was. I loved you through missed anniversaries and canceled vacations and solo doctor appointments, but love isn't enough when one person is giving everything and the other is giving whatever's left after work. I know, Nathaniel acknowledged, and I can't undo the choices I've made. I can only promise that my priorities have changed. Words are easy, Nathaniel. Then let me prove it with actions, he countered. Move back into the penthouse, both of you, or I'll move here, or we'll find a new place together, whatever makes you comfortable. Let me show you every day that you and Julian come first now. Olivia shook her head, not in refusal, but in caution. It's not that simple. No, Nathaniel agreed. It's going to be complicated and messy and probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But nothing worth having comes easily, right? Julian chose that moment to reach for his mother, tiny arms outstretched in clear communication of his desires. Nathaniel transferred him carefully, noting how naturally they'd learned this silent choreography of parenting. One step at a time, Olivia said, neither accepting nor rejecting his proposal. Let's get through the hearing next week before we make any decisions about the future. It wasn't the answer Nathaniel had hoped for, but it wasn't a rejection either. As he watched Olivia carry Julian to the kitchen for his afternoon snack, Nathaniel realized that for a man who had built his career on immediate results, he was going to have to learn the virtue of patience. If this story is touching your heart, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories of redemption and love to viewers like you. Now, let's continue with Nathaniel's journey as he approaches a critical turning point. The night before their rescheduled court date, Nathaniel sat alone in his penthouse office, surrounded by the trappings of success that had once defined him. Awards and accolades lined the walls. Financial reports, documenting the Reed Group's meteoric rise under his leadership, filled the bookshelves. Everything in the room spoke of achievement, of goals met and exceeded. Yet none of it felt significant anymore. On his desk sat a small framed photograph, Julian's official 8-month portrait that Olivia had given him last week. In it, the baby wore tiny suspenders and a bow tie, his serious expression so, like Nathaniel's own, that it had made both parents laugh when they saw it. Mr. Reed? His house manager, Davis, appeared in the doorway. You asked to be notified when it was 8. You have dinner reservations at 8:30. Thank you, Davis, Nathaniel replied, gathering his jacket. And the other arrangements we discussed? All taken care of, sir, Davis confirmed with a knowing smile. The car is waiting downstairs. Le Cirque had been their restaurant once, the place where Nathaniel had proposed 5 years ago, where they'd celebrated Olivia's promotion to head of neurosurgery, where they'd shared the news of her pregnancy with their closest friends before everything had fallen apart. Tonight, as Nathaniel waited at their old table, the corner booth with views of both the twinkling city, lights, and the elegant interior, he felt a nervousness he hadn't experienced since that first proposal. This evening wasn't just dinner. It was perhaps his last opportunity to show Olivia that the changes he'd made were permanent, not a temporary performance to win back his family. Olivia arrived precisely on time, as was her habit. She wore a simple black dress that Nathaniel recognized from their early dating days, her hair loose around her shoulders in the way he'd always preferred. You look beautiful, he said, standing as she approached. Thank you, she replied, allowing him to help with her chair. Samantha's watching Julian for the evening. I told her not to expect me too late. I appreciate you coming, Nathaniel said. I know you probably had a dozen better offers for the night before a court appearance. A hint of a smile crossed Olivia's face. Only 11, actually. The small joke, the first she'd initiated since their reconciliation attempts began, felt like a significant victory. They ordered wine, then appetizers, falling into a conversation rhythm that was almost familiar. Nathaniel told her about Carson's successful handling of the London investors. Olivia shared stories from the hospital, including a particularly challenging surgery she'd performed on a 4-year-old with a rare brain condition. "You saved his life," Nathaniel observed, genuine admiration in his voice. "We won't know for sure until he recovers," Olivia replied modestly, "but the early signs are promising. Still, the skill required to operate on such a small brain, it's remarkable, Olivia. You're remarkable." She looked up from her plate, studying him with slight suspicion. "You never used to be this interested in my work." "I should have been," Nathaniel admitted. "I was so caught up in my own accomplishments that I failed to appreciate yours. That was wrong of me." The honesty between them felt new and fragile, like thin ice that might crack under too much pressure. Yet it held as they finished their main course and declined dessert, both too aware of tomorrow's court date to have much appetite. "Walk with me?" Nathaniel suggested as they left the restaurant. "Just for a few minutes. There's something I want to show you." Olivia checked her watch, then nodded. "All right." But not too long. They strolled through the nearby park, the same park where they'd once discussed having children someday, where Nathaniel had first admitted he wasn't sure he'd make a good father given his own difficult childhood. The memory hung between them, unacknowledged but present. "This past month has changed everything," Nathaniel said as they walked. "Seeing Julian every day, being part of his life, watching him learn and grow, it's made me realize how empty my success was without you both to share it with." "Nathaniel," Olivia began, a note of caution in her voice. "Please, let me finish," he interrupted gently. "Tomorrow, Judge Landry will ask us if we want to proceed with the divorce. Before you answer, I need you to know something." They had reached a small fountain in the center of the park, illuminated by soft lights that made the waters sparkle like liquid diamonds. Nathaniel guided Olivia to a bench overlooking the peaceful scene. "3 weeks ago, I resigned as CEO of the Reed Group," he said quietly. Olivia's eyes widened in genuine shock. "You what?" "I'll remain on the board, but Carson will take over day-to-day operations. The transition has already begun." "But the Reed Group is your life," Olivia protested. "You built it from nothing." "No," Nathaniel corrected. "It was never my life. It was my distraction, my way of proving I was nothing like my father, that I could build something lasting instead of destroying everything I touched." The admission, one he'd never voiced aloud before, hung in the night air between them. Nathaniel had rarely spoken about his childhood, about growing up with a father whose business failures were matched only by his personal ones, about the poverty and instability that had shaped his relentless drive for success. "I thought if I built something big enough, secure enough, I could protect us from ever experiencing what I went through as a child," Nathaniel continued. "But instead, I became a different version of my father, physically, present in photographs but emotionally absent when it mattered." Olivia's expression softened. "You're nothing like your father, Nathaniel. You may have been absent, but you were never cruel." "Absence is its own kind of cruelty," he replied. "One I inflicted on both of you without even realizing it." From his pocket, Nathaniel withdrew a small velvet box, not a ring box, but something larger. He placed it in Olivia's hands. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside was a key attached to a silver compass keychain. Olivia looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "It's the key to a house," Nathaniel explained. "Not a mansion or a penthouse or anything ostentatious, just a home with a yard for Julian to play in and an office where you can review patient files and a kitchen big enough for family dinners." "You bought a house?" Olivia asked, incredulous. "I found a house," Nathaniel corrected. "I wanted you to see it before I made any decisions. It's just a few blocks from the hospital, in that neighborhood you always liked with the big oak trees." Olivia stared at the key, emotions flickering across her face too quickly for Nathaniel to interpret. "This isn't about buying your forgiveness," he said quickly, "or pressuring you to make a decision. It's about showing you that I'm committed to building a life that works for all of us, not just for me." "I don't know what to say," Olivia admitted. "You don't have to say anything tonight," Nathaniel assured her. "Just promise you'll think about it before tomorrow, about whether there's enough left between us to build something new, something better than what we had before." Olivia slipped the key into her purse, her expression thoughtful. "I'll think about it," she promised. As he walked her to her car, Nathaniel resisted the urge to press for more assurance. He had said his piece, made his gesture. Now all he could do was hope that the changes he'd made, both internal and external, would be enough to earn a second chance with the family he'd almost lost. Judge Eleanor Landry reviewed the Reed file one final time before court began. In her 23 years on the bench, she had developed a sixth sense about couples, which ones were truly finished and which ones still had unresolved feelings complicating their legal proceedings. The Reeds had struck her as an interesting case from the beginning. The initial filing had been straightforward enough, a high-powered executive and a brilliant surgeon whose careers had pulled them in different directions. But the moment Julian Reed had entered her courtroom in his mother's arms, Judge Landry had seen something shift in Nathaniel Reed's carefully composed expression. Now, 30 days later, she was curious to see what had developed between them. Had the continuance simply delayed the inevitable, or had it created space for genuine reconciliation? The bailiff called the court to order. Judge Landry nodded as Nathaniel and Olivia entered. Separately, she noted, but without the palpable tension of their previous appearance. No attorneys accompanied them this time. Another interesting development. Reed versus Reed, Judge Landry announced. This matter was continued 30 days ago at the request of Mr. Reed. Are both parties prepared to proceed today? Yes, Your Honor, they answered in unison. Very well. Before we address the dissolution petition, I understand there have been developments regarding custody arrangements for the minor child, Julian Reed. Is that correct? Nathaniel cleared his throat. Yes, Your Honor. Over the past 30 days, I've had the opportunity to become acquainted with my son and to establish a relationship with him. At this time, I would like to formally acknowledge paternity and request the court consider joint custody arrangements rather than the sole custody initially proposed. Judge Landry turned to Olivia. Dr. Winters, what is your position regarding Mr. Reed's request? Olivia stood, her professional demeanor firmly in place. I do not oppose joint custody, Your Honor, provided certain conditions are met. Regarding Mr. Reed's availability and involvement in Julian's daily care, Judge Landry made a note in the file. That's a significant change from your initial filing, Dr. Winters. May I ask what prompted this shift in position? Olivia glanced briefly at Nathaniel before addressing the judge. Mr. Reed has demonstrated consistent commitment to Julian over the past month. He has adjusted his work schedule to accommodate childcare responsibilities and has shown genuine interest in being an active parent rather than a financial provider alone. I see, Judge Landry nodded, unable to hide her slight smile. In her experience, these kinds of changes often signal deeper shifts in the relationship dynamics. And regarding the dissolution petition itself, do you wish to proceed with finalizing the divorce today? A moment of silence filled the courtroom. Judge Landry watched as Nathaniel and Olivia exchanged a look that contained volumes of unspoken communication. Your Honor, Olivia said finally, we would like to request that the dissolution petition be withdrawn at this time. The simple statement, delivered in Olivia's clear, confident voice, caused a ripple of reaction through the small audience in the courtroom. Judge Landry raised an eyebrow, looking to Nathaniel for confirmation. Is this a joint request, Mr. Reed? It is, Your Honor, Nathaniel confirmed. Dr. Winters and I have agreed to attempt reconciliation before making any permanent decisions about our marriage. Judge Landry removed her reading glasses, studying the couple before her. I don't normally offer personal observations in my courtroom, but in this case, I'll make an exception. Marriage, like parenthood, requires consistent effort and presence. It cannot be treated as a secondary priority if it's to succeed. We understand that, Your Honor, Nathaniel replied. I certainly hope so, Judge Landry said, because that child deserves parents who are fully committed, both to him and to each other. With that parting wisdom, she signed the order dismissing the dissolution petition, without prejudice, allowing them to refile should their reconciliation efforts fail. As she watched them leave the courtroom together, not touching, but closer than they had been 30 days ago, Judge Landry allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. In a job that often involved dividing families, it was refreshing to occasionally see one trying to rebuild. 6 months later, Olivia stood in the kitchen of their new home, watching, through the window, as Nathaniel pushed Julian on the backyard swing set. At 14 months old, Julian had begun walking, unsteadily at first, but with increasing confidence each day. His vocabulary had expanded to include approximations of mama and dada, along with enthusiastic pointing and babbling when words failed him. The house Nathaniel had found was perfect, a comfortable 4-bedroom colonial with mature trees and a wraparound porch where they often sat in the evenings after Julian was asleep. Not extravagant but spacious enough for their needs, with room for the second child they had cautiously begun discussing. The transition hadn't been seamless. Nathaniel's adjustment from CEO to board member had come with moments of restlessness and uncertainty. Olivia had struggled to fully trust his commitment, waiting for the day when work would once again take precedence over family. They'd argued about parenting styles, household responsibilities, and the lingering resentments from their time apart. But they'd also rediscovered each other. Weekly date nights had become sacred time, protected from work calls and hospital emergencies. They'd established new traditions: Sunday morning pancakes with Julian, monthly family photos. To document his growth, evening walks around the neighborhood when weather permitted. The doorbell rang, interrupting Olivia's reflections. She opened the front door to find Samantha Patel on the porch, elegant in a cocktail dress with a small gift bag in hand. "Am I the first to arrive?" Samantha asked, kissing Olivia's cheek as she entered. "As always," Olivia confirmed with a smile. "Nathaniel and Julian are in the backyard. The others should be here soon." Today marked their 15th wedding anniversary, a milestone that 6 months ago had seemed impossible to reach. They decided to celebrate with a small gathering of their closest friends, a way of acknowledging both the struggle and the joy of their journey together. "How are things really?" Samantha asked when they were alone in the kitchen, her voice lowered in case Nathaniel came inside. "No sugarcoating for your best friend." Olivia smiled, appreciating Samantha's protective instincts. "Honestly, better than I expected. Different than before, but stronger in many ways." "And Nathaniel, is he still fully engaged, or is he slipping back into workaholic mode?" "He has his moments," Olivia admitted. "Last week he got so caught up in a board meeting that he was late picking Julian up from daycare. But the difference is he called to let me know, and he was genuinely upset about disappointing Julian." "Progress, not perfection," Samantha nodded sagely. "Exactly, and that goes both ways. I've had to learn to share parenting responsibilities instead of controlling everything, to trust that his way of doing things isn't wrong, just different." The back door opened, and Julian toddled in ahead of Nathaniel, face lighting up when he spotted Samantha. Sam," he exclaimed, one of his newest words. "There's my favorite little man." Samantha scooped him up, covering his chubby cheeks with kisses that made him giggle uncontrollably. Nathaniel followed, his casual attire, jeans and a simple button-down, a stark contrast to the impeccable suits he'd once worn daily. He looked younger somehow, more relaxed, the constant tension he'd carried having gradually melted away over the past months. "Samantha," he greeted warmly. "First, as usual, we need to adjust our invitation times for you specifically, and deprive me of my special time with this handsome boy, never." She bounced Julian on her hip, receiving more delighted giggles in response. More guests arrived, colleagues from the hospital, friends who had stood by Olivia during the separation, a few board members from the Reed group who had become personal friends. The house filled with conversation and laughter, the atmosphere warm and celebratory. As evening fell, they gathered on the patio where Nathaniel had arranged for catering, another change from the days when he would have insisted on the most exclusive restaurant in the city. Julian, overtired from the excitement, had fallen asleep on Olivia, his shoulder, his soft breathing a familiar comfort against her neck. "If I could have everyone's attention," Nathaniel called, tapping his glass gently. The conversations quieted as all eyes turned to him. 15 years ago today, I somehow convinced the most brilliant, compassionate woman I'd ever met to take a chance on me. He moved to stand beside Olivia, his hand coming to rest gently on Julian's back. "For most of those years, I thought I knew what success looked like. I measured it in acquisitions and investments, in buildings with my name on them, and accounts with more zeros than any person needs." Nathaniel looked down at his sleeping son, then at Olivia, his expression softening. "I was wrong. This, my family, my home, the people in this room who have supported us through everything, this is success, and I'm more grateful for it than I could possibly express." He raised his glass. "To second chances, to redemption, and to my incredible wife, who had the courage to show me what truly matters." The guests raised their glasses in response, but Olivia barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on Nathaniel, not the polished businessman who had once commanded rooms with his authority, but the man who had humbled himself to rebuild what he'd nearly destroyed. The man who now spent hours on the floor playing with their son, who attended every pediatrician appointment, who had restructured his entire life around the family he'd once taken for granted. Later, after the guests had departed, and Julian had been transferred to his crib, Nathaniel found Olivia on the porch swing, enjoying the quiet evening. He settled beside her, their shoulders touching comfortably. "Happy anniversary," he said softly. "Happy anniversary," she echoed, leaning slightly into him. That was a lovely toast. I meant every word, Nathaniel replied, especially the part about being grateful for second chances. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the gentle creak of the swing the only sound in the peaceful night. Do you ever miss it? Olivia asked suddenly. The adrenaline of closing big deals, the constant travel, being at the center of everything. Nathaniel considered the question seriously. Sometimes, he admitted. There are moments when I see something Carson is handling and think I would have approached it differently, or when I hear about a conference in Tokyo or London and remember the rush of those international negotiations. He took her hand, interlacing their fingers. But then Julian does something new, takes a step I haven't seen before or says a word, for the first time, and I realize what I would have missed if I'd stayed on that path. No deal, no matter how significant, could ever compare to being here for those moments. Olivia squeezed his hand in understanding. It hasn't been easy for either of us, this new balance we're trying to find. The best things rarely are, Nathaniel agreed. But I wouldn't trade this, messy and imperfect as it is, for anything we had before. From inside the house, the baby monitor captured Julian's soft murmurings as he shifted in his sleep. Both parents paused, listening for signs that he might fully wake, but the sounds settled into the rhythmic breathing of deep slumber. I never thanked you, Nathaniel said after a moment. For what? For bringing Julian to court that day. If childcare hadn't fallen through, if you hadn't been forced to bring him with you, we might not be sitting here now. Olivia smiled, a hint of mischief in her expression. Childcare didn't fall through. Nathaniel turned to her in surprise. What? Samantha wasn't scheduled for surgery that day. She offered to watch Julian, just like she had dozens of times before, Olivia explained. I chose to bring him to court. But why? Nathaniel asked, genuinely confused. You knew I wanted a clean, quick divorce. Bringing Julian would only complicate things. Exactly, Olivia nodded. I wanted you to see what you were walking away from. Not in photos or videos that could be ignored like emails, but in person, where you couldn't look away. The revelation stunned Nathaniel. You planned it? Not as a manipulation, Olivia clarified, but as a last chance, for you, for Julian, for us. I needed to know if you could actually look your son in the eyes and still choose to be a distant figure in his life. And if I had, Nathaniel asked quietly, if I'd gone through with the divorce even after seeing him, then I would have known for certain that the man I fell in love with was truly gone, Olivia replied honestly. And Julian and I would have built our life accordingly. Nathaniel was silent for a long moment, processing this new understanding of the day that had changed everything. Finally, he brought Olivia's hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Thank you, he said simply, for believing there was still something worth saving when I couldn't see it myself. As they sat together on the porch of the home they were building, not just the physical structure, but the family, bonds within it, Nathaniel reflected on how close he had come to losing everything that truly mattered. One canceled babysitter, one courtroom confrontation, one moment of recognition when he saw himself. In his son's eyes, such small hinges upon which the door of his entire future had swung. In the quiet intimacy of that moment, Nathaniel made a silent promise to himself, to Olivia, and to Julian, that he would never again forget what real success looked like, that he would choose every day to be present for the small moments that ultimately constructed a life of genuine meaning, that he would be the husband and father his family deserved, not perfect, but perfectly committed. And as Olivia rested her head against his shoulder, the trust between them gradually rebuilding. With each day of consistent presence, Nathaniel understood the true meaning of wealth. It wasn't measured in buildings or bank accounts or business achievements. It was counted in moments like these, quiet evenings on a porch swing, a sleeping child safely in his crib, and the love of a woman who had given him the most precious gift of all, the chance to become the man he was always meant to be. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe to Love and Twilights with Dr. Phillips. Your support helps us continue sharing stories that remind us all what truly matters in life. Remember, success isn't measured by what we achieve in boardrooms, but by the love we nurture at home. Thank you for joining us on this journey of redemption and second chances.